also love this picture in many ways because I love dogs, but also providing scale for all of us because I didn't include scale for this specific work. Um, and a lot of my works are kind of this way with a lot of colors, a lot of different textures. So I use anything that I could manipulate and alter in some way. So I started out as mainly using fabrics, and from there I started including wood, plastic, using hot glue as a mean to adhere something, but as a visual material. And same thing with these screws. I use them as like hardware or like push pins as hardware to hold my work, but as part of the visual elements as well. So like in terms of materials, like nothing is off limit for me as long as I could work with them. And a lot of materials are very easily accessible because either they're recycled or they are materials they can easily get at a craft store. There are sometimes like children's toys or a lot of different things that I feel like I can get my hands on. So this is a detail of my work. Again, this is actually a detail from a work called A Series of Responses too. And the series of responses is my process of making. So I explained this before. I may start out with this orange plexiglass, and then I start building off of that. And the process of making decision is really simple, really thinking about, okay, like in this case, oh, this plastic piece is really shiny and hard. I want something soft to contrast with that. And then I add it onto this piece. And then it might grow to include some wooden pieces, and then I might sew onto it. And then it grows to include a lot of different materials as well. So since the pandemic, my practice in terms of thinking about making hasn't changed, but my material choices has had to adapt in many ways. So really thinking about scaling it down because I also kind of lost my studio and had to relocate to Connecticut. So I had to work smaller and really working with the materials I had at the time. So a lot of like notebook pages. This is actually like a Ziploc bag that I had and pieces from shipping or like Amazon boxes that I had at hand. And they became like these smaller collages. And then I had an opportunity to show them all together at the Shelter in Place Gallery in Boston. So it's a small size gallery, right? 20 by 30 by 17. But when you photograph it, it makes it so that your work looks expansive and large and monumental. And I kind of love about, that's like what I love about this gallery and this exhibition, because it felt like it was like magic happening in front of my eyes. So such small work becomes so big. So this is another piece from that exhibition. Again, still using a lot of different materials. And the titles that I use in my works are really, really simple. Like it's the first word that I could think of. So this piece is called Long Orange because it's orange and it's long. So very simple. And then what this age of pandemic and being taking shelter in place or being quarantined allowed me to do is really develop my practice in creating animation or moving images. So really thinking about how to make using different methods, different materials, and also thinking about how my sculptural work, people see the end result, but doesn't necessarily see the process. And with these animations, people are able to see my process of making in many ways. So you get a sense in like how I think about things, how I mix things, or how I become just go all over the place when making. And this is my recent work so far, trying to create some things that are freestanding or hung from a ceiling. So I am also thinking about, these are, as of right now, these are GIMP materials, but I'm also thinking about developing them into more fun items, more colorful items, so that they become really part of the piece as well. So, and these are some detail shots. So again, still really thinking about in a very sculptural, material oriented way, and start to scale up large again. And these are some of my collage pieces, which conjunction to my sculpture practice, still really thinking about and finding value again in small works and finding value in more of a two-dimensional work as well. So thank you everyone for allowing me to introduce my work.
Thank you, Loretta. That was really, really wonderful to hear from. Juan or Cicely, who would like to share their work next?
Go for it, Cicely.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cicely Carew. Loretta, wow. Okay. Thank you. And Michael, thank you for having me here. And I'm so excited to be with all of you. So here we go. I'm Cicely and a multimedia artist. I started out as a painter and printmaking, just working with 2D. But I will give you the visuals so you have an idea of where I'm coming from. A little less fancy, but so a couple years ago, I came back to painting and didn't have a place to work from. So I came back to the States from Mexico. I was living there for like 5 years and had my son, needed to get back to art and just figure out what it all means. So my process is very much guided by just following the thread. So I begin with a tool in hand and color that I have in mind, just walking into the studio, but I'm not sure what it's going to be, and I let that guide me. And I like to say I'm making friends with the unknown and really embracing what will come. That's still grounded in the language of painting and discovery. So this is a monotype. It's Nectar. It's a 30-inch by 22-inch page, and I like to think about treating the surface, but that really begins with the plexi. And so it's unfortunate because what happens on the plexi stays on the plexi, and it's really just juicy and delicious, and then you run it through the press and it's an entirely different thing. So here I get to slow down the process and not really get to respond, but it's more planning, which moving on, that then turned into a series that became a public art work. So I guess I'm still embracing the public art, like I'm a public artist, but bringing my studio practice out into the public is how I like to think of it, because the intention is to serve, and I want to make that connection through making. And this is about transformation and consciousness building and just slowing down and actually being with what's there. So I think that I was thinking about time, and that presents itself with these like gear-like shapes, or you could say pencil shavings, or like a tree rings. So I'm inspired by what's out in the natural world and what's found, and then what's seen and how I experience it, and then interpret that in different ways. So after the 2D beginning, I want to take that language and then start playing with the tension of 3D and what that might look like and how to paint differently, which then became this collage. Like, how do I sculpt space beyond cerebral space, and move the language of painting and this vernacular that I have built out into something that can be more tactile and give more life to the movement that I hope to create in on a 2D surface through painting or printmaking. So layering is a huge part of the process, and this way allowed me to really just get my hands on it, and I think remove some of the mental gymnastics that you can do in painting. So I started working with this netting, that it's fencing, and what it came from was I was just walking around Fresh Pond one day and saw this netting around these flowers. I'll show you a detail. And I just got thinking about the children that were in the camps, and prison and prisoners, and like they're these beautiful beings. But what does that netting signifies? Are you protecting that flower, or are you guarding it from me? Am I now the aggressor, or am I posing some sort of threat? How does it get free? What is it to love something that you fear? How can you hold space for light and the dark and what's unknown? So these are a lot of things that are going on while I'm making, and I think just moving through that physically is how I just come to generating these patterns and the layering, and just let it flow. So going back to more formal things, how do I take something that's a canvas, and the canvas is like loaded with history and painting, and that being the pinnacle of art, and how do I push against that a little bit, and allow myself to do like naughty things, like cut up the canvas? How do I take this very precious thing and make it mine and still lovely, but into another place that's not just breaking out of the frame and breaking out of the bounds and bondage that it comes with, and expectation. So and marrying the painting language with the printmaking language, they somehow exist in different worlds, but they're not, in my mind. But how do I take the elements that you would use through these practices and then marry them in some way? So this is Centropy, and that's what came of that. It's an installation shot from the Trustman Gallery at Simmons. I have GIMP here too, Loretta, and I love it. I'm still keeping up with the netting, and just responding to the site. So this did start my studio, and then it lived there on this wall. And then I did that and wanted to just go back to painting and see, like, do I have the chops to keep painting, and what does that mean, and how do I take these items from other parts of the world, like tape I might find on a shelf somewhere, and paint with that. So I really try to take what an object or a material and make it do what it's not necessarily supposed to do, and give it a new life and a new way of being, because that's just how I hope to live, and that we can stay flexible in our thinking this way and maintain the movement and the gesture, and then impose limitations upon how I'm approaching something, just to keep me not so freeform, but in a space of push-pull, and considering what material can do, and what the surface means, and how to treat it, and make it live beyond its own limitations. And then this is another painting. This is from my thesis show at Leslie, and just going back to layering the gesture, using the tools that I would in printmaking, and taking other parts of paper and collaging that into this space, but complicating it a bit, so I can't you can't quite tell what's what. And just, following that. So what's the next step? How do I make that come to life in a different way? I also want to say I'm not a linear thinker. So if I'm all over the place, that's what happens in the studio. But going back, so I have a tidy painting that you saw, and it's rectangle, but it's still needing to move. And this is at the Trustman Gallery again. And so I just want to break it up again, think about what other materials can be used. So I have some of these zip ties. What do they signify? How do I put them into this space in a more fanciful way? And there's some tape in here. I got to draw on the wall and play with some vinyl and respond to what's there, and continue to layer. So using the wall, add to the wall, then the canvas, and build off of that, which I just think is interesting. But now we're in COVID, and it happened right as the show closed last March 5th. And so I did this. I was just playing with the idea of a different dimension, and like what happens in the digital world. How do I take painting into that space, and some photographs, and marry the two, but still work with the language of this marrying together, and the dimensionality that can then be flattened, and then taking those, just finding ways to discover the passages that happen in these flattened spaces, and how they can emerge into another way, and maybe like jumping off the screen, and how do I make something live this way when we're in the technology age. I mean, we're beyond the technology age, but it's evolving. So what does that feel like? Does it need to be a painting on a canvas to be a painting? And then this was another one for the call and response show at the Newport Art Museum over the summer. And I had a painting and some photographs, and I was responding to a painting by Bob Dilworth, a very gifted, amazing painter, who had this, larger than life, just so intricate and beautifully layered paintings. Like, he's a technical master of this. And I wanted to think, well, if I can't be out in the world, how do I create something that's equally impactful, if I can say like equally, and keep pushing up against the language of painting and what that looks like in the digital sphere, and still give it that tactility that something physical has. So it is a painting that's been digitized with photographs that were taken from the world, and here we are, and that's so we got. And then I thought I need to go back to painting. So I always return to what's known, and then like, what don't I know about it? Because I think there's something happens, I get lost, and then I forget, like, do I know how to paint anymore? I don't know. So this is For What Is Bitter or Sweet are all gifts from my growing, is the name of this painting. And it was on the cover of the Boston Art Review. Yay, thank you very much. But I was surprised, just because there was so much I don't know in here. But trying to play with the tools, like, I don't like to use a brush when I paint. I like to use these industrial, spatulas and little scrapey things, or I don't know, a nail sometimes, but just to keep me in a flow of not knowing and being okay with that, but applying it to painting, where I think there's always the expectation of you have to know, and maintain the layering, which will jump forward, and then I need to leap back off the 2D surface to the current installation that's at the Prudential. So I was granted this beautiful opportunity to take the painting into the 3D sphere and put on my sculptor hat. Like, can I do that? And I'm just playing with some materials here again. So the patterns and the textures of like screen mesh or tulle, and that wiring mesh that you see just everywhere. And what that means is about building. We're always building worlds when you see that the netting and the wire. It's in the gardens. It's out around, the construction site. So I think it's important for me to always keep that at play. And then light was another dimension that I wanted to bring in. So it's 2D, 3D. Now what's 4D? How are we living in that space? How do you activate it? How do I incorporate something that's so natural and guides our thinking process into the world and throw it in your actual living experience? So that's just another process shot. And then here's a detail of one of these things that we called astral beings. And I think just to get in the headspace of working way outside of what I normally do, what that could be like. I liked the idea of trying to really move your eye through space and take those layers that we do in painting in any other form and really put you in it and give you the task of just getting dizzy, like having to force your eye to see things that you want to touch but you can't. And it's also, well, what's sitting in front and what is not, and what happens when they're interacting. So this is one of them. It's just floating in the sky, and it changes over time. So time was another dimension that I got to bring in, to bring what I like to call paintings in the sky. And then here's another one. So it's everything that I work with in my painting and printmaking practice, but I got to touch it now. And that to me, I found really exciting. So, and then this is the last one I have, another one of the astrals that we have going, but I enjoyed this process so much more just because I learned a lot about how materials are functioning and what they're doing and how to apply them, but staying within the play of layering and process, and just following the thread and not knowing, and using all of the marks that I do in other forms, but keeping the painterly eye on the process and staying in that mind frame. So, and then calling it painting, because I'm painting, damn it. Oh, I'll just show you the last one. Another part was like the architecture and keeping the lines at play. I will say vinyls are really difficult to work with, but it's just, it's about layering, and then light and what it can do, in the window film. So, painting in the sky. And I showed this to Michael just the other day, because after all of this, the hoopla and wow, that was really exciting. I did it, or did things that you didn't know were possible. I've gone back to the paint, to the layer, and to what's known, but then it feels really foreign and I'm not sure. So I think that this will be the next jumping off point to that, pushing the needle forward, as Loretta said, just to keep the thought process going, and seeing what it can become. So there it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I can say, for one, just seeing the work that is up at the Prudential right now, you've made me want to go out and brave the world. So thank you for that, Cicely. Next up, we are going to hear from Juan.
Hi, everybody. Pew, pew, pew. Juan Escobedo here, coming to you live. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, thank you to all of you for inviting me and letting me talk a little bit about the work. So let me get into it real quick. I'm just gonna skip through some of this. You guys can see this, right? So just to preface like my practice, I guess, and this is how I do every, I guess, artist talk that I've been doing recently, talking about myself as, or identifying myself as like a queer, brown individual that comes from like a lower socioeconomic status close to the border town of El Paso, Texas, which is a border town very close to Ciudad Juarez, actually a stone's throw away from Ciudad Juarez. And I mention this because it really feeds into the practice that I have, that I've been doing my art practice. I actually started off as a pretty traditional painter. These are some of the paintings that I was making while I was in undergrad. And when I went to grad school, it quickly transitioned into objects that were things like this. This was my thesis show. Some of you might remember that. And so a lot of what the work revolves around right now is basically installation, collaging, and really just trying to sort of, how can I say this? Just like identify myself, or how to like establish like my identity essentially in what I guess we could call a sort of a white structured world. So this is a lot of the undergrad stuff. And this is some of the newer stuff that I've been working on. This is Houseman. This has to do with almost like a performance or video collage that I've been doing. So they started off as these collages that revolve around this character. He's almost like an alien that has somehow found himself in our world and is sort of influencing the environment to an extent, and it's creating like a flux or liminality. And so through these collages, I'm exploring the idea of like psychological homelessness, and sort of like the experience that a lot of like first and second generation individuals that come into the United States feel, like the idea of assimilation, but then trying to hold on, or trying to like hold on to a culture that you're a part of. So that's one of the things that I've been doing, Houseman. This is one video clip I'm just gonna show you. It's super short. Let's see if it pops up. So there are these really short clips of Houseman sort of maneuvering through essentially our world. And what I'm doing is essentially the same thing that I was doing before, which was collaging. I'm collaging video clips together and trying to create almost like a series. And actually, I'm going to try to finalize this series of Houseman. And actually, I recently got accepted to residency in Mexico City. So hopefully I'll be able to finalize that as like almost like a season of videos, or like an episode, like a 6-piece episode thing. On top of that, what I'm also doing is working a lot directly with cardboard and creating these cardboard clothes. So I'm just going to show you this last one real quick. And essentially what I've been dealing with a lot is cardboard itself and its identity and how it parallels my own identity. So of course, cardboard is brown. Also, cardboard is seen as like sort of something that can be thrown away. It's also utilitarian. And that's something that I, to an extent, as like this brown person from like a lower socioeconomic status, identifies with. And I started to explore using cardboard and incorporating cardboard into the practice while I was at Mass Art. But when I was using it there came a lot of like, I don't want to call it like pushback, but there was definitely like a resistance and a misunderstanding of the cardboard and why I was using it. And there was a push to maybe potentially like covering it up and maybe transitioning into a quote unquote better material. And so that always stuck to me. And I sort of try to challenge that by making more, right? So rather than covering it up like I was before, trying to really just present its identity the way it is and see what comes of it. And so I've been trying to create these objects, and they're called Cartoon by JS. So I was sort of creating I guess like a play on words, saying almost like the J. Crew clothing line, right? And I add these descriptions to it. So feeling down, boyfriend W, systematic racial oppression making you blue. These new jeans by JS are here to help. At such a low price, they're sure to make your life easier. We're socioeconomic and cultural identifying appliques that let you and anyone else let you and anyone else know exactly who you are. And they're available in these whitewashed bronze, not pale enough, pale brown, and deracialized umber. And so those are the main things that I'm working on right now. And just like trying to explore cardboard specifically and how people respond to it without covering it up, and really just dealing with its brownness, and to an extent, I guess like dealing with my own brownness and how I maneuver through the world based off of this. I also have some digital stuff, but we'll stop there, and that way we can talk about the questions that Michael might have for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Juan. That was amazing to see. So since we're on Zoom, and Zoom is leaves a lot to be desired, I'm sure everybody here has just created a massive appetite to find out where can they see more of your work, where can they find out more information about all of you. What are the best locations for all of you to be seen, see what's going on in your future, current practice?
So for me, it's on Instagram. So it's at Juan Escobedo Art is my handle. And then my website is jce-art.com. And I'll put it in the chat to everybody so that people can see it.
Okay. You can find my work at cicelycarew.com or on Instagram at Cicely Carew.
So same thing for me. Best way to find out is usually my Instagram at Birdie Park, and my website, lorettapark.com. And thank you, Michael, for putting it in the chat.
Yes, for anybody looking for all of that, it is now in the chat. So you'll be able to follow along with the latest work by all of these amazing, amazing artists. That was really, really fantastic. I have to say, I was riveted listening to all of you talk about your work. And one question I had, and I'm sure a lot of people are wondering this, is anyone who's experienced an art education, there is such a strong emphasis on painting and drawing in arts education. The choice you've made of materials, how you use them, feels incredibly important and necessary for your work. And I was really interested to know what caused the shift for each of you.
For me, when I was trained like a traditional oil painter, figurative, right? And the school that I went to was a small liberal arts college in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And it was sort of a combination of two things. So the first thing was like I did those paintings, which were 4 paintings based off of the Buffalo Man. Along with those in that BFA show, I created these white collages that were made out of torn tissue paper and put them together. Unfortunately, I don't have any documentation of it. And my idea was, because at the time I was all about like dreams and memories and how somebody experiences a dream or a memory. So I was thinking of the white paper as sort of like this haziness, people would walk through them and then get to the paintings, but that unfortunately didn't happen. And so when I went to grad school, I brought that with me, and now thinking, okay, maybe I need to start painting on this paper. And so it was a lot of painting on the paper, but then it wasn't going anywhere. And then I started using cardboard because it was sturdier. And that's when people were like, whoa, why are you using cardboard? Like, this is ugly to an extent. I mean, it was like the underlying, like not assumption, but like statement. And then from there, I was like, why the fuck not? Like, why can I not use cardboard? And so that sort of like sprung the cardboard thing. I didn't realize till like years later, these whole like how the materials to an extent are classified, and they have a hierarchy and class to an extent. And so now that's why I'm sort of like holding on to that. But yeah.
I'll piggyback off of that, if I may. Hierarchies and disrupting them was really important to my making, my thinking, especially in grad school, for several reasons. But I think you have to break away from what's known and what you think is important and how things have to be to get to the other side, and discover things along the way, and preserve tradition in some form, so we're all on the same page and speaking the same language, and then manipulating it and pushing it beyond the boundaries of what we know. So, and that I think is important. That's how we learn. And if we're educators and educating, then I think to constantly question is what we have to do, just to evolve. So, Loretta?
Thank you, Juan and Cicely, for sharing first. Because I think my process is very similar. I think, like Juan, you mentioned hierarchy, and Cicely, you too, it was this idea also about like what is considered the most important medium, the most important material. And I think for many of us in like higher education, it was like the oil paint, and it was the painting that was done with oil. And I think when I was painting, so I went to a small liberal college, and it wasn't an art school, but I think in the beginning was very much interested in painting, and I liked the malleable nature of oil paint, the way I can move it around, that I can convey texture and like the weight of objects or the likeness of a figure. And I was very much into this idea of like how two-dimensional work like painting allows you to create something that seems magical or fantastic, that doesn't like bound by some of the real world elements, like physical objects or physical things do. But then it came a point where I wanted physical and real things in ways like I can mix two paint together to get a color. But what if I combine like a blue thread and a red thread and still mix it, right? And still get a color, but also let those two materials kind of retain their materiality in many ways. So I think that's where I moved to sculpture. And then I moved back to painting, or I like still explore painting because I still want that idea of kind of magic, fantastic nature of, mixing two things together to create a whole new color. So I think I am more fluid now because I came from the drawing and painting and delved into sculpture.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that. When I was in undergrad also, I was making those installations, and they revolved around like perspective, especially the one with the blue landscape. And I thought of it as a painting. I definitely was like, this is like a painting because this is how I'm approaching it. But people were like, no, this is installation. And I actually for some reason I was like fighting it a lot because I was like, no, I don't know what I didn't know what the fucking solution was. I was like, I shouldn't call myself anything that I don't know what I am. But now I guess I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. But yeah, it's there's something about like being able to, like the transition between these two, right? Like 2D to 3D, like that inadequacy or maybe like this instability for me is really attractive. Because I feel like it resonates with the viewer more than like a just a flat piece or like a fully just 3-dimensional piece. Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah.
I think there's something about it challenging your sense of space, like your, you know, proprioception. That like this is from my undergrad days at Mass Art, and I look at it and every day I'm like, it brings me back to the moment where I wondered, is this it? Is oil paint all there is? I collaged into it from these monotypes I made too with oil, and it all feels very like locked in and important and tidy when it's 2D. And when you pull it out into a sculptural space as like it wants to be, but it can't, that I think things get really interesting, and you have a way to like disrupt one's perception of where they are and how they're, I don't know, I guess just navigating space. That's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think space is right. It's like very important, and I think like in all work, right, in 2D and 3D dimensional work, but I think like with perhaps more of a 3-dimensional work too, it becomes also like a material that you recognize, perhaps, right? Like a material that you use in your work, and if someone else recognizes that specific material, I think that allows then people to enter into the work. I think differently than painting. I think painting, there are obviously a lot of different ways to enter into the painting as well. But there's something about like the physical object or an item that is embedded in your work that you recognize. Like I think sometimes I use like fabrics that are donated by, I guess donated, weird, like shared with me from my friends. And when I use like pieces of their clothing, and my friends will recognize that, like, oh wait, like I gave you those. Or someone is like, oh, like I remember those beads. We use them to make like, bracelets. I think those are moments that feel so intimate, right? Like if someone like physical, either like something that touched their body or like memory that they have, they can like then enter into. Like that was something that I found like, oh, like that's why I keep coming back to more of a 3-dimensional work. But
I loved what you said about allowing like string to maintain its materiality. I think that that to make the decision to keep it and use it as for what it is, but also give it a new meaning and a way to be seen, is something that inspires me, or how I like to think of things. Like in a painting, I have string, like I'm looking at your background like, I've done that, like it. And someone said, well, you're using the string, why are you not painting it? Why aren't you drawing it? And I just thought, like, why should I? It functions so well as it is. I could render this to look just like a string, but I think there's power in saying like, no, it's enough. It's enough as it is, and can be just what it is and function the same. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, before we go into the Q&A, I just wanted to say like one last thing. I feel like this all like the transforming it into something else, that's something that I got a lot from the cardboard, and I wonder if it's because of like this also feels like we're shit talking like painting completely.
I know. Not-
what we're doing. But I feel like this, like in the practice of painting itself, it's always like about, it's like creating this illusion, right? Or making it into something else. It's almost like a chameleon, right? And like, I feel like within like that context, and then us just being like, hey, this is cardboard and it's like a house, but it's like also cardboard, and just deal with it. They're just like, what the fuck? So I'm wondering, I feel like it's very much rooted in that, like this old school like way of thinking of painting itself. Like
Right.
it's oils, it's like these pigments that are grounded. When I mean, like I feel like those things behind things, not like things, but Loretta, those collages that you have behind you could be just, they're paintings. They just happen to be
Right.
out of string and paper and all this stuff together. So anyways, yeah,
Hey.
I think we have some Q&As, right?
We do. We have some really wonderful questions. And I will say, as a painter, I am no way offended by any of your comments on painting. But if anybody has any questions they would like to ask the panelists, please pop them into the chat and I will get to them in order and as much time as we have. So first question I have is from Annie Dean, and it's for Cicely. And it asks do you use your prints, i.e. cut them up and use them in your 2D work?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I do. Sometimes it will stay a print, and sometimes it needs to be cut up and used in the painting.
Mhm.
Right, fantastic. Next up, we have a question for Juan from Doris. And this question is the cardboard treated to last or will it disintegrate over time? Is the wearing away intentional like Eva Hesse's work?
It's not treated. Okay, it's not treated. But let me tell you, and this is something that I was telling somebody actually yesterday morning about. You can like place a cardboard out and it's going to be exposed by like the elements and sun, and it's going to last you like 30 odd years out there. It's not going to disintegrate. So that's all I have to say, because that is something that a lot of people brought up when I was using the cardboard, and they're like, well, maybe you should think of like something else that's going to last and it's more archival. And I'm like give it a rest. Not you, but like, that whole idea. It probably, it will disintegrate probably. Not like now, not in 5 seconds or anything, but give it 30 odd years, 40 maybe, 50. We'll see. I'm just gonna glue it or spray it with something.
And it's important that we do stuff in our own work to make sure that the restorers continue to be employed.
True. I mean, the restorers just need like hot glue for my work, so.
Next up, we have a question from Janet Lauren Hill. It says, I'm noticing a thread across all of your work in swarming or swarm dynamics. Thinking about how within a swarm, the abstract shapes and undulations are caused by one bird reacting to possible threats and bumping into another, causing a response in the group as a whole, as that reaction ripples. Do you see this type of ripple occurring in your work? And anyone can pick that up. Thank you, Janet.
Yes. I think my answer is like absolutely. I think because like the core process of my work is about responding, right, to like what happened before. So it's not like something, I don't have like a planned answer or planned idea of what my work is going to be. It's going to be that I'm going to start with something like a color, object, texture, and then it's just going to grow out of it. So it's kind of interesting to kind of work with that uncertainty, but also it's really freeing because I don't have to follow or commit to a certain idea.
That was an excellent answer. I have like nothing else to say to that. Yeah. It's there. It has to be there. It's, I like that you also said responding, because it's different than reacting. This is like, it's a measured, thoughtful response and flow, and being in that space. I think you get to just examine what it is that you're responding to and what's experienced out in the world, at least for me, and placing it and letting it unfold,
Right.
the making.
Okay. Loretta, so this comes from Jenny Plant, and maybe this is someone you know because it says,
Yep.
Loretta,
Hi,
Amy
Jenny.
would like to know if you always use the materials you have on hand, or do you search for just the right material when making work?
So I think the first starting point is the materials that I have. So I will work with things that I already have, and usually within my vicinity that I see, like immediately from where I'm sitting. And as I'm working on things, I realize like, oh, this could need something else. Like for example, the stick pieces that I'm working on, I started calling them fight sticks. But anyways, those I'm working on, and I'm trying to make it so that it connects to the ceiling. But I used GIMP because that's what I had. But I also was thinking about maybe using more of a plastic saturated color materials, and I found these chains that children use to like learn how to count, and they look really exciting. So I bought those. So I think it works in a lot of different ways when it comes to choosing materials.
Thank you.
Thank you for
And
the
then
question.
any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And then we have a statement in the chat from Judy Haberl. I see the idea of material urgency in all of these, and along with this, the abandoning of the rectangle.
Yeah, screw the rectangle.
Totally
kidding. I like rectangles. They're fun.
So if there are no further questions, and last chance for anybody in the chat. It's an amazing resource of these amazing panelists. If you have your questions, pop them in now. So if there are no more questions, and then if you don't have questions, compliments can also go in the chat. I would like to thank, first and foremost, our panelists, and thank you to all who have attended tonight. We really appreciate your support. Ongoing, we have our David Schmidt exhibit, which is up through April 17th. And also on view at the Cahoon Museum is our exhibition, Scott Pryor Illuminations, which is on view through May 29th. If you would like to stay connected with what we are doing here at the Cahoon Museum, you can sign up on our website to receive emails that will let you know of future programs such as this and our upcoming virtual artist talk with Scott Pryor, which will be happening on April 21st. If you would like to support our work here at the museum, please consider making a donation or joining us as members as we continue to bring you new exhibitions and programming. And don't forget, connect with us on social media to stay up to date with day-to-day activities here at the Cahoon Museum. Thank you again to our panelists. This was absolutely amazing, and I hope that everyone who attended enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Thank you so much. Yay. Thank you, Cicely, Juan, Michael.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you.
Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you so much. I always feel a little like the queen at the end of these things.
Let's do this one.